Hi everybody, happy Tuesday. I'm filming this in my home studio, except I'm filming it a few days before I've left on my trip. Today I'm actually outside of Salt Lake City teaching at Handy Quilter Academy. So I'm hanging out with bunches of fun quilters, and I can't promise that I'll be able to sneak away today with my camera to get some Facebook Live time in. So this is a Facebook unlive, undead video. I have a couple things to bring up to you. It's going to be a little shorter because I can't actually talk to you. But what I will do is if you leave comments at the bottom of this video on Facebook, I will answer them all tonight because I have a couple questions for you. As usual, I have a different quilt behind me. It is called Sweet Tooth, and it's one of my cutie patterns. All of my cutie patterns are available on my website, debbybrownquilts.com. It is made with 16 fat eighths, plus some background, plus an inner border, outer border, and binding. And it makes a very nice giveable size quilt. Smaller than a twin, but bigger than just enough to cover your lap. It's a good snuggle quilt. So, this is the original one I made to test the math on the pattern. And then I made one using Downton Abbey Egyptian fabrics. So that one's floating out there traveling around as part of a trunk show. Then several weeks ago, I dug into my 1.5 inch strip bucket where I keep all of my scrap strips of 1.5 inches. Whenever I'm done cutting my fabric, if I have a little bit left over, I throw it in the bucket. So I pulled out everything that was black or black and white, and I decided to set it with light blue fabric. I have a shortage of quilts that are made for boys, so I thought I'd put a black and blue quilt together. Sounds like something that a boy would like, and I have it right here. It is in my binding pile, so it's not finished being bound yet. Did you check out this border fabric? Is that amazing? This is, I think it's a Heather Bailey fabric, but I absolutely fell in love with it and needed it for the border. And then this is a Sakwa fabric for the back. So really fun stuff. This quilt, again, this is a quarter of it shown here, and it needs to be bound. That's why you can still see the batting sticking out. But I took a picture of this before and put it on Instagram asking people to guess how many yards of ribbon candy quilting there are in here. Now, in this quilt, the ribbon candy is in the light blue, and I don't quilt the black at all. And the ribbon candy is also in the black inner border. That's the only quilting on here. I think I did leaves in the border. Didn't really matter. You weren't going to see it on this print anyway. So I actually did the math to figure out how many yards of ribbon candy are in this quilt. Now for me, that's how many yards of ribbon candy joy are in the quilt, because it's my favorite, one of my favorite quilts to quilt, because it's just all ribbon candy. So I'm going to give you a preview of the answer. It'll show up on my website later on whenever I finish the quilt and write an article about it. But the correct answer is 43.1/8 yards of ribbon candy throughout the whole thing. And you can do the math to figure out how many inches that is. So, after I finished doing that, I was still in my 1.5 inch scrap bucket, and I had all of my plain blacks, and some were a little deeper black than others. Some were black on black polka dots, some were a little bit of a marbled fabric, but they all read as black. Then I dug out my bright fabrics, because apparently I like bright fabrics. This quilt behind you won't show you that. It's very soothing spa colors, but I do like bright fabrics. So I made this quilt all over again, all out of strips from my scrap bucket. So here's part of the quilt. Now, I put in reds and hot pinks, oranges, yellows, greens, lime green, blues, turquoises, and purples. So the question I have is, it's going to have a black inner border, and I need you to settle a dispute between my husband and I, because my husband is known online as Super Hubby, which he is. But we disagree about this quilt. I don't know why I ask him quilt questions. It's not really his strong suit. So I asked him if this looked like a girl quilt or a boy quilt. Now, he told me it looks like a boy quilt. And I said, really? You think so? And he was like, you asked, I answered, which is true. But I still think it looks like a girl quilt. So I need to know how to border this quilt, and I'm going to ask the quilters. which would be you, because I trust your opinion a little more about quilts. My husband I trust with anything, and if he wanted it for a specific boy, I'd make it. But do you think that this can be a male quilt or a female quilt? And I know it doesn't really matter, but as far as bordering it, I can change it. So this is a scrap quilt. I'm not going out to buy new fabric to finish it. I save my new fabric purchases for new fabric. You know, when I want the new line of Tula or whatever else is coming out. So I have this fabric. Can you see it? It's kind of a darker pink. It's not very bright, but it has this lovely ginkgo in it. I did buy the rest of the bolt at an end of the bolt sale at Sturbridge Quilting and Sewing earlier this year. So I have this is enough for the border, and then this would be enough for the backing. And this is Valentine fabric that I showed to you before, but it doesn't scream Valentine, it's just pink. So border, binding, and backing. Girl quilt. I also have boy fabric. This was another end of the bolt purchase. Isn't that pretty? I was going to use this as a binding for another quilt, but I knew that there was more fabric in this chunk that I could use it for a backing or a border instead of wasting bits of it on binding. So this for the border and binding, and this for the backing. So if you think it's a girl quilt, I can put the pink in the pink. If you think it's a boy quilt, I can continue with the black and the blue. I have everything. I'm ready to go with it. I will not do this quilt before I leave for Salt Lake City. So once I read the answer, I'll come home and finish the quilt. But I will be counting votes. So it's up to you. The pressure is on. So that's an important decision I need to make. And we have a bit of an argument going. This quilt was fun. I usually go to my local quilt shop, the Quilt Basket in Pawling, New York, and I buy the rest of a bolt on a sale rack. And that's where a lot of this fabric comes from. That was the border here, that was the backing here, and actually this orange is an old Thimbleberries fabric I've had in my stash forever. I didn't know what fabric to put to break up the blue on blue. So I just went to the color wheel, and opposite blue on the color wheel is orange. I had orange and it worked great. Again, it's going to be a giveaway quilt. It was just a sample, so the risk is low, and it worked out. So that's my question on Sweet Tooth. This is the Sweet Tooth pattern. It is available on my website, like I said, and it is 16 fat eighths, less than 2 yards of background, less than a half a yard of inner border, and 2 yards for the outer border and binding. So it's pretty economical quilt and very fun to quilt with 43 1/8 yards of ribbon candy quilting. If you want to practice ribbon candying and you think you're not very good at it, by the time you're done quilting this quilt, you will be. That's how I got good at it. So that's the one quilt question I have to ask you. Now, I have a few other things to show you. I had some guest interviews, some guest people in my video a couple weeks ago. My friends Terry Lucas and Jolene Williams were here. Terry Lucas and I are really, in person, very good friends. And we talk about a lot of the stuff that goes on in the world, like the quilt world, in our personal lives, and in the world at large. And so many times when something goes on, people just kind of blow up in anger and kind of pile on, and it seems to make things worse. So we were talking about what can we do to make things better. You know, when you're sitting glued to the news, or sitting and waiting for that phone call that can change your life, or sitting glued to the computer and just digging into whatever mayhem is going on. I've started turning off the computer and turning off the news. And I do this especially when I'm waiting for one of those life-changing phone calls that can happen. We all go through those periodically. I go and quilt. So we thought we would, instead of sitting and just being sucked into the madness, you know, staying informed, but getting our hearts and our heads into something a little more productive, we would quilt. So we started 1,000 postcards for peace. If you look back on my website under blog, you can go back to 1,000 cards for peace post, and you'll see what we're talking about. Soon, if not already, the Facebook page will be live, and we would love to join you. We would love to have you join us in making postcards if this is something that can help you get away from the madness. The first postcard I made, let me grab it here. Here. Now I mail my postcards. You can actually put a stamp on the fabric and put it through the mail, but I use these cellophane envelopes, and then I put in a little paper with the address, and then I can stick a stamp to the envelope. So the recipient will be able to see the postcard through the cellophane, but it won't get damaged in the mail. So here's the first postcard I made. Some of it is available online. There you go. This one's kind of a weird one to see because I was going for very subtle. And sometime this week I will have a video up, not a video, an article up of how I made this quilt. And it was just a little sample of fabric that I cut down to the right size to fit in the envelope. So I'm not sure if you can see this right here. That's a nose, and these flowers are where the mouth is, because I want myself to speak truth and to speak beauty into the world rather than ugliness. So I'm putting pretty things where the mouth goes to see if can add to the world, add to the beauty in the world and the love in the world by what comes out of my mouth. So anyway, that's how that came out. This is actually 5 different colors of thread in there. I'm not sure it's going to show up much because I'm using a different video camera. The video camera I usually film with is very old and it died. It can't be fixed. It can't. So I'm trying a different video camera, and I'm not really sure how it works. So we're learning all sorts of new things today. But here, the flowers are pink and purple. The leaves are green, the feathers at the bottom are yellow, and there's white thread up here. And I wanted it to be very, very subtle. I think the color will correct if I get out of the way. So this is the postcard. And I used 100 weight Invisifil, which are some lovely quilting threads, to make them really, really subtle. You can see it in person, and I think on the photographs I have online, the color shows up kind of subtly, but these are all the different colors I used that you can't necessarily see. I did use a Deco Bob bobbin, the same bobbin for the whole thing, because I quilted fabric and then a thin batting, and the color on the back didn't matter because I was fusing it to this stabilizer to make it a postcard. Then I took some fabric and fused it to the back. Now, I'm not sure what this camera will do, so this might be in mirror image, but if you know anything about Sadako and the 1,000 paper cranes, on the Sadako statue in Hiroshima, there's a plaque that reads, "This is our cry, this is our prayer, peace on earth." So this is the first postcard I'm going to mail out. But where this, and I'm sure I will be making more when I'm waiting for that phone call, or whenever I just can't listen to the news anymore, or just kind of in turmoil. I'll be making more and sending more out. But if you want to try doing some of this shadowy, really subtle quilting, consider using the Invisifil. And if you don't want to commit to all those colors, it also comes in little boxes. And these are 400 meter spools. They come 6 to a box, and there are 10 different boxes. These are available on my website, debbybrownquilts.com, and as are all of the larger spools in single colors. So these are 2,500 meters. This is such a fine thread that on regular thread, the spool would be this tall and that fat, just because this is 100 weight. So it's a lot more on here than it looks like. So anyway, playing with that thread. The next postcard I want to show you, if you follow along on my blog or on Facebook, you'll notice that I was making a bunch of postcards that have letters on them. Now, some of you may have inferred that I'm making those for my grandson, which is correct. He's 3 years old, and I made a bunch of different letters that might happen to spell out his name. And after I finished spelling his name, I went to visit him, and I asked him what he wanted next in a postcard. And he doesn't have all 26 letters of the alphabet in his first name, so I was expecting him to pick a letter, you know, like a Z or a K or some weird, some letter that he wanted next. Here's a hint. If you haven't worked with 3-year-olds ever or for a while, and I'm getting to know children all over again since, my kids are in their late 20s and 30s, if you ask a 3-year-old a question, you're never going to get the answer you expect. because I asked what he wanted next and was expecting, like I said, a letter. Oh, I would like a Q, please. No, what would you like next in a postcard? And the answer was a rocket ship. So here's his rocket ship. This is that same backing fabric from the quilt I already showed you. Here's some scrap fabric I used there. Now, I had a lot of fun with this because I had to make up what a rocket ship looks like. So I spent way too much time on Pinterest and got the basic shapes. And then I got out I piece on a straight stitch machine, so I had to get out a second sewing machine that doesn't normally stay up in my sewing room to be able to get the zigzag. So I put up the machine, I'd cut everything, I had fused it together and put some stabilizer behind it to do the applique. So I used a plain white cotton to stitch around the outside of the body of the rocket ship. And I don't know what these are called, so we're going to call them wings. But around the wings, they're just plain gray scrap fabric. And I decided to stitch around it with silver, like metallic, which is cool. Then for the yellow circles here, because it needed color, it was black, white, and gray. Black, off-white, and gray, which is even duller. So I pulled out one of my favorite Fabulux threads. As you can see how skinny it is on the cone. And this is not my first cone of this. This is called Mellow Yellows, and it's 3 different shades of yellow, which you might be able to see here. So I did a really tight zigzag stitch around there. And then around the postcard edge, after I fused it with the Peltex in the middle, I thought it needed more color because when this little boy asked me, he was talking about fire and stars, and we went for simple. But this is the fire he was asking for. And then I used this thread, which is another one of my Fabulux threads. This is called Majestic Sunrise, and it is red, orange, and yellow. So I stitched that around the edge. Can you see the variegation? And this is a random die. So it's not going to make perfect striped. It might be long red, short yellow, long orange, short red, long orange. So it's all out of order and all different lengths. So that's the postcard that's going in the mail to a very special little boy. But another secret about making this postcard that has made my life so much easier is, do you do machine applique? I was actually doing this while on the phone with my best girlfriend, who doesn't sew at all. And she was asking me questions about how to put together some favors she's doing for her daughter's wedding. And I was able to answer her in seconds just because she doesn't sew, she's not crafty at all. But while we were talking, I was stitching this. And she was like, "You just made that now?" Because every new piece I would take a photograph of and just text it to her while we were talking. And she was like, "You rethreaded your sewing machine that quickly?" Or, "How fast do you do that?" Number 1, she doesn't sew. Number 2, she has no idea how many hours of sewing experience I have in my life. Number 3, she has no idea the amount of sewing materials I have in my house. I tell you I'm filming in my studio, but in truth, this is my dining room, which is kind of my studio annex. So if I have dinner guests, there's a lot of cleaning going on to get everything back out of the dining room, because a lot of my travel supplies stay here. So anyway, I was running back and forth, picking up different threads from 2 different rooms and changing the threads for the applique. And she was like, "You did that really fast." What she doesn't know is that I also changed the bobbin just in case there's any peeking. But here's my secret weapon. I have pre-wound bobbins of Deco Bob in every color. So when I'm doing machine applique, I can just pull the right color bobbin out and put it back in and grab a different one and put it back in. Now, these are available in 2 different sizes, which are a size L and a size 15. This class here is size 15, which works well in my Stitch 210 machine as well as my Stitch 710 machine. They're typically the taller plastic bobbins. Now in my Stitch 510 machine, they're a little shorter bobbin. That is a class L. So these are available in both of those colors. And if that's something that you would be interested in, I can definitely get that and put that on my website. But with doing the postcards for peace and the postcards for some little man in my life, this is making all the difference to me. So let me know if you think this is something you might like. I'm terrible with prices. They're under $40 for the pack, but I don't have an exact price, and I can get that for you. So that's pretty much what I've put aside for my first of my 2 Tuesdays that I'm away. Now, I am in Utah, and next week I will still be in Utah, and the following Tuesday is going to be the 4th of July. So leave me a vote as well if you want me to put a video. I'm going to do a live video, I think. I might be traveling, but I can put it out either on Monday or Wednesday, which is the 3rd or the 5th. So let me know which of those 2 days is better for you, and I will put out either a Facebook Live or a Facebook Unlive video if this works. Then after that, I'm going to be in Cleveland. I'm probably going to be in Pittsburgh at some point visiting family. I'm going to be in Maine, and then I'm going to England. So I have a pretty busy summer ahead with a lot of quilting involved. And the schedule's going to get kind of weird with the travel and some holidays, but we'll keep finding each other. So thank you for letting me do an unlive video this week. Keep in touch with me by commenting on this video, and I'll get in touch with you when I get back to my computer. And stay in touch through Instagram, Facebook, my blog, my website, however it is we keep in touch. And I hope to have another video out for you next Tuesday. Happy quilting!